Note-taking for consecutive interpreting. David Violet here. Actually, I'd like to address something that is obviously related to note-taking for consecutive interpreting, but it's a little bit off subject. It's remote interpreting, RSI. And I want to say why I love RSI. I know it's not conventional to love RSI, and I can see a lot of the downsides. There are huge downsides. I like traveling, not too much, but it's good to travel. I like, of course, being on site and really being able to take in the entire context and thus being in a better position in terms of determining the actual meaning and the actual message that I need to interpret. So there's no doubt that remote interpreting is an obstacle in that respect. You're not as close to the action. You are not able to walk up to the speaker and say, hey, what are you going to talk about? Or I'm the interpreter. Do you have any last minute notes you could, and maybe even just have a coffee and get a better feel for what the subject is going to be and things like that. Obviously, these are huge drawdowns. But what I do love about remote interpreting is that you still are doing your art entirely. I mean, as long as you do have the conditions, decent sound, which is still very hard to get, background documents, which actually, as always, are hard to get. But let's take a look at other technological advances and the way they've impacted different professions. Okay, so let's take a look at the tractor and the farmer. Nowadays, the farmer can sit in an air-conditioned tractor with a computer, and you could say that that's an improvement, but let's face it, the tractor has replaced part of the farmer's work. The farmer used to be walking on the ground, digging and touching the soil and planting the plants with his hands. And now, the machine is between him and those things. And he's not actually doing his art the same way. Well, as interpreters, we are. Okay, we've gone over the problems, the obstacles, but we still are, in terms of our raw material, we still are listening to the message which is conveyed through language. We are processing, understanding, analyzing that message, and then expressing it in our own words in the target language. So in remote, our art is not taken away from us. Take a look at the driver who once was taking care of horses and now is behind a wheel. Okay, you might say that the driver is still doing the same thing. The driver has to find his or her way around the city. But in many ways, an important part of the driver's work, knowing how to use the reins, how to communicate to the horses, and feeding the horses, etc., that was part of the driver's work. And now it's no longer there. Take a look at automatic translation. Much of the work is actually being done by a machine. And the translator is checking that. And you could say that it's more interesting, possibly, because now the much of the tedious work of translating is done by the machine. But still, part of the art is taken away from the translator. The translator is no longer looking at this word and going, okay, where has this word been used, or this term, this phrase been used before? What is the usage in my client's literature, etc.? This is being done frequently by a machine, and much of the work has been taken away. Whereas the interpreter continues in remote to do basically what the interpreter was doing before. Nothing is doing actual processing of the language for you. It's just that we are now brought to the client through this technology. I know that this is not a consensus view, but or maybe it's optimistic. I can see many more problems. For example, clearly competition is going to be stiff. I live in California, where cost of living is relatively high compared to most of the world. And so a competent interpreter in a much cheaper country is likely to be very stiff competition for me, and that's going to be a problem. But I do think that we are brought closer to our clients, and I also think that if we play it right, the market can expand enormously. I know there's so many problems: the sound, the competition, the intermediaries trying to Uberize us, etc. These are all problems, but if we are smart and we keep working on it, we may overcome them, and the market may expand. One of our other enemies as interpreters is the banishment of multilingualism altogether. Because if people cannot find interpretation, they resort to all speaking in one language. And that's frequently a disaster. If you have at a conference, at a meeting, remote or otherwise, people who are having to express themselves in what for them is a second, third, or fourth language, or the best expert is being replaced by someone far inferior in terms of expertise, simply because that person can speak the one language of the conference, usually English, that undermines communication. If remote can bring interpreters closer to the clients, there could be an enormous increase in demand and in the amount of work. Of course, we still have this enormous task of convincing people that, we can't just pop on to a remote situation and do interpretation as if, I don't know. Some people try to get me to work by the minute or by the hour. They don't understand. And we have to continue our education effort. But I still think there's an upside, a true upside to remote interpretation. Please do subscribe if you like this. Please do say you like or dislike this video. And this is pretty controversial. Please add your comments below. What do you think? Is this foolish of me? Obviously, we can't get out of it anyway, right? The remote is here to stay. And I might mention, that I teach, and I will put up a QR code, and down below there will be a link for you to access free course on note-taking for consecutive interpreting. The free one is full of symbols. It can tell you how to make symbols, how to find the symbols, and how to use symbols. So thanks for listening. I hope you liked it, and please do comment below.